The moon shone gaily from the sky, and the gentle night breeze danced happily around Andrea as she sped down the clear road. It was a few minutes past midnight, and the atmosphere was nice and relaxing and gave the appearance that everything was okay. But everything was far from that. Andrea's hands were shaking as she gripped the steering wheel with so much force that turned her knuckles white. With the air that flew in from her open window, her hair flew in every direction, and the continuous tears that flowed out of her eyes dried up. For the 1000th time, she wished she lived closer to her brother. When it was Thanksgiving and it took her longer than every other family member to go over to her eldest brother, Brian's house for dinner, she hated that she lived on the outskirts of town. Whenever she was running late for work, she hated that she lived so far from the main town. She hated that if she ordered pizza, when it got delivered to her, it was always lukewarm. But all of those reasons seemed so trivial compared to the one that made her think that way today. The road was empty, and in all her panic, she could not even find it in her to be scared. Rather, she cruised down the road as her car's speed edged dangerously close to the limit. Her caution went out the window as she kept stepping on the gas in the hopes that she would reach her home as soon as she could. All she wanted was to go home, wash off all the sweat and fright from her body, curl in her bed, and pretend like tonight did not happen. She was sure that when she woke up the next morning, she would have fingerprints on her face. Her eyes might even be swollen, and she definitely would have a raging headache. And even though she knew that her condition would get her to answer a million questions at work, especially from her boss who did not like her, she was ready to go to work. Her real fear was staying at home and letting the cause of her fright get to her. She was getting close to her house. She drove past the house that always left all their lights off. She drove past those that hung up a Happy Birthday Jules banner that morning. And just as she was about to take the last bend that would lead to her house, she heard the cop's siren behind her, and she slowed down until she stopped. She looked frantically at her reflection in the car mirror. Her eyes were scared, and understandably so. Her hair was all over the place, and with the help of the little beads of sweat on her forehead, some of her sandy brown strands stuck to her forehead. She pulled them back with a swipe of her hand and swallowed nervously as a cop approached her vehicle. The cop walked to the driver's side, and from the rearview mirror, she could see 2 other cops standing behind her vehicle. She swallowed again and wrung her fingers. Her window was already wound down, so the cop bent a little to be face to face with her and said, "Good evening, ma'am." She greeted him as well. "Good evening, officer." He stretched his hand at her and said, "Your license and registration, please." She nodded as she tried to get it from her glove box. "Are you aware that you were driving close to the speed limit?" the cop asked her as he waited. She nodded at him. "Yes, officer, I apologize. I will slow down." The cop heard her, but he did not say anything else as he waited patiently. Slowly, she pulled the documents out of their safe space and shakily handed them over to the cop, whose hands were still stretched toward her. He cautiously took them from her, and she hoped that he would not ask her to step down from her vehicle. She looked like she had been dragged through 50 acres of land. Her hands were shaking, and she wished she had not left her house today. The cop went through the papers, then handed them back to her. He watched her put them back in her glove box and throw him a smile, brighter than the moon, before he asked her to step down from the vehicle. Andrea was not totally shocked. She was not a trained official, and even she would not have bought the facade that she had just put up. Talk more of a trained government official. She was not shocked, but she wished that the cop would let her go. Maybe if she had paid closer attention to the body of her vehicle, she would have understood why the cop asked her to step down from it. As she unclasped her seatbelt, another cop flanked the car from the right side, and she felt trapped. Slowly, she stepped down from her car. The moment the cop's eyes narrowed in at her appearance, she knew. She knew that she would answer a ton of questions that night. She knew that when she answered, she would lead them back to where she was running from. Her white dress was stained with different colors. The yellow color on it was from the bowl of mustard that she had thrown wildly. The brown color was from the peanut butter that had rubbed on her as she struggled to run to the dining room. And the red was from the ketchup and from her blood that ran from the open wound on her arm. She looked battered. Even the cop's eyes told her so. Another cop, slightly bulkier than the first one, marched to her front and asked, "How did you get bloodstains on your vehicle?" She turned to look at her car. It looked clean. Yes, she looked thrashed, but her car was okay. So what was the officer even talking about? She gave him a confused look, and he repeated his question as he pointed to the bloodstain on her car's bumper. Just as she was about to say that she was not sure how the stain got on her car, his voice boomed at her. "Everyone here can see that you have either been through or done something, so you better start talking. Because I guarantee you, none of the cops here would allow you to leave this premises if you don't talk." Andrea knew that it was up. She had two options. She could either easily confide in the police and let them fight for her, or let them pry the truth out of her while painting her as an offender. She did not want to be painted as a delinquent. She would break in 1,000 pieces if she was asked to spend the night behind bars. Her entire body hurt from the evening, her chest hurt, her eyes stung, and her throat was clogged up, and she struggled to speak. But she told the cops everything, from the moment Brian's wife, Danielle, had invited her over for dinner. When Andrea woke up that morning, she felt under the weather, and she sent an email to Human Resources to let them know that she was sick and would not be able to go to work. But she was not really sick, and she knew it. She was just tired, and she needed some hours of uninterrupted sleep. So after she sent the email, she shut down all her devices and fell back on her bed to sleep. She woke up 30 minutes past noon, and she lazed in bed with her phone before she took a shower. When she was in the shower, her boss called to yell at her for sending an email to HR and leaving her in the dark. Her boss threatened to fire her any day she failed to notify her 24 hours earlier that she would be unable to go into the office. And there she was, under the shower, as her boss yelled at her through the phone. It was a normal thing for her boss to yell at her. She was already used to it, and she knew how to deal with it. Of course, she thought about quitting several times, but the job was a stable one, and the pay was good. If she wanted to pay off her gigantic student loans before she turned 80, she had to stick with jobs that paid her well, even when the boss was a bitch. And that was what she did. After her boss finished yelling and cut the line, Andrea went about her activities. When she was drying her hair, her phone rang again. She thought it was her boss who wanted to yell at her some more, so she took extra time to get the phone. But when she saw the caller's ID, she smiled. It had been a week since she last spoke to Danielle. Danielle invited her over for dinner that night, and as much as she wanted her alone time, she knew that if she did not go over to see Danielle, she would not see the woman in the next coming months. Danielle and her husband Brian, who was also Andrea's brother, worked in a non-governmental organization that visited undeveloped countries and provided relief in form of food and medicine for the children. And Danielle was scheduled to travel to a country in Africa in 2 days. So Andrea dressed in her favorite dress, strapped on a pair of sandals, slung her bag over her shoulder, and went off for dinner with her brother and his wife. When she heard the clatter of dishes as she walked into the house, she thought Danielle had dropped something. Danielle could be clumsy sometimes. She dropped stuff frequently, and she had gotten some injuries and red spots from the number of times she had fallen from the stairs and rolled off the bed in her sleep. So Andrea hurried off to the kitchen to help her in there. What she did not expect was to walk into the kitchen and see her brother seated on top of Danielle with all his muscle mass, as he hit a plate of mashed potatoes in the woman's face. Andrea was so shocked she gasped. The sound made Brian turn to face her, and Danielle thrashed wildly underneath him as she struggled to escape. But it was impossible for her tiny frame to escape from all that weight. And Brian yelled at Andrea, "Leave now!" Andrea had never seen her brother like that before. Sure, he had always been hot-tempered. He could be vexed by the smallest things. But he was also the one who drove to her high school, picked her up from cheer practice, and gave her a tub of her favorite flavor of ice cream before he told her that their mom and their auntie were involved in a fatal car crash. He was the one who slept in her pink bedroom with her every night when she was scared. She could not relate that Brian to this one, the one that sat on his wife and beat her senseless. She cried, "Leave her alone, Brian!" She struggled to hold him from his back, but he put out his hand and his elbow hit her in the stomach. She doubled over in pain as she cried out. Brian was still having a field day with Danielle as he slapped her repeatedly on the cheek and yelled at her. When the pain from Andrea's stomach subsided, she reached for their coffee maker and smashed it on her brother's head. He fell off his wife as he cried out in pain. Andrea quickly ran to Danielle's side. She was struggling to catch her breath. Her eyes were bloodshot and teary and she told Andrea, "Leave, just leave. I will deal with him by myself." Andrea refused to listen to a word of what she said. "Leave? Just look at what he has done to you." Pain washed out of Danielle's eyes in form of tears as she said, "It is okay. I will deal with him. Leave." From the way she said it, Andrea knew. She said it with the normalcy of a frequent action, and Andrea knew. This was when she realized that all the times that Danielle had said she fell down the stairs, or when she sported a black eye and said it was as a result of a pot lid that fell on her from the cabinet, it was all Brian's handiwork. The moment the realization shone on Andrea's face, Danielle saw it. She said, "It's okay, But she was cut off by the scream that escaped Andrea's lips as her brother dragged her by her hair. When Brian's fist wrapped around Andrea's throat and brought her face to his, she could smell the alcohol that his breath reeked of as he yelled, "I asked you to go home!" Then he flung her body on the hard kitchen counter. Her side hit it, and she picked up the bowl of mustard and threw it at her brother's head. He growled at her as Danielle yelled at her again to leave, but Andrea remained put and flung various food items on the counter at her brother. In anger, Brian grabbed the kitchen knife and threatened to cut her with it. That was when she knew that her brother was really out of it, and she then heeded Danielle's advice to leave. Her brother lunged at her, and she ran to the other side of the counter. He sliced the air in front of her, and she ran around the counter while she flung the food items at him. Ketchup, syrup, onions, everything she could find. He flung them right back at her, and Danielle struggled to get back to her feet. Andrea and her brother went around the counter as they threw foodstuff at themselves. It was just like the food fights they had when they were little, only this time, her brother held a knife, and there were tears in her eyes. When Danielle succeeded to stand, she lifted the dinner that she had prepared earlier and poured it on her husband. The spaghetti was still hot, and as it was poured on Brian, he let out a groan of pain and slashed the knife in his hand. It cut Andrea's arm, and she began to run away. As she ran out in tears, Danielle yelled at her retreating figure, "Don't call the police, Andrea!" Andrea was confused and shocked. When she reached her car, her legs almost gave out, and she would have fallen on her face if she did not put out her hand to hold her car bumper. She rested on it for a while as she struggled to catch her breath. Why did Danielle ask her not to call the cops? Brian had gone mad, and she was definitely going to alert the law before he caused any more harm. As she got out her phone to call for help, Danielle's name flashed on her screen. Was someone playing a mean trick on her? How did Danielle manage to get her phone out to make a phone call when she was stuck with a raging Brian in the house? She picked up the phone with shaky hands, and she heard Danielle's shaky voice on the other end as she told her again, "Andrea, don't call the cops." Andrea began to sob. "But why? Look at what he did. He has been hurting you." Through the phone, Andrea could hear the bang on a door, and her brother yelled at his wife. He called her all sorts of names and threatened to kill her. Andrea asked Danielle, "Where are you?" Danielle said that she was in the bedroom and that she was safe. She said that Brian just needed some time to cool off, and he would stop attacking her when the alcohol cleared off his eyes, and he became level-headed. She explained that she found out earlier that afternoon that Brian was siphoning money from the organization, and she called him out for it. She threatened to report him to the board of directors, who they both knew would sue him. He ordered her to shut his mouth, and when she asked him how vile he could be to steal money from a charity organization, he stomped out of the house and came back an hour later drunk to his brain. She told Andrea that she was fine and asked her for the 1,000th time not to call the cops. Andrea knew that Danielle was anything but fine, but she sounded as though it wasn't the first time that she had seen her husband turn into a beast. And since she was so sure that they would find a solution to the problem when everything was calm, she decided to go ahead and listen to Danielle. She was shocked to see her brother behave like that, and she'd probably hate him for life, but he was also her only sibling, and she did not want to see him being whisked away to jail for attempted murder. Maybe if later on, Danielle chose to go to the law about the domestic violence, Brian would still face punishment, but it would be a considerably lighter one compared to the one he would face if sentenced for attempted murder. Andrea thought about all these, and she decided not to go to the cops, even though a huge part of her conscience pricked her as she drove to her house. So when the cops stopped her, a part of her was glad that fate had done the right thing for her, and she did not have to make the tough choice by herself. That was part of the reason why it wasn't difficult for her to spill everything to the cops, who then trailed her car back to her brother's house. Andrea stood outside the house, and the cops barged inside. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she waited for them. After a few minutes, she heard her brother cry loudly, and a cop brought out a bloody Danielle. Andrea let out an ugly sob as she ran to hold Danielle. As her brother was pushed past them in cuffs, and Danielle was covered by a blanket while they waited for the ambulance, she thanked her lucky stars that the cops had pulled her over. The moon still shone brightly, and things were not fully okay, but at least she was sure that Danielle was okay. Alex would never have thought that his life would end up this way. Attending college and getting a dream degree made Alex believe his life would improve, and right after university, he would find a job and settle. That plan, however, did not work out. Alex drove an Uber every day for over 12 hours and was often bored out of his mind. That a squirrel scampering across a road excited him. The job was quite dull, and it barely paid enough for Alex to be able to survive without starving himself to death. The one rule that Alex had no trouble following concerning his job was that he wasn't supposed to interfere with his customers' private lives. He never had the time, patience, or interest to listen to their stories and show any inclination to know more, especially since he had so much going on in his life. The countless jobs he had applied to had come back with a rejection letter, pushing Alex over the brink, questioning his existence and his will to live. He had no hope left to continue scouting for jobs. He accepted that driving an Uber and barely making enough to pay rent and fill his stomach was what his life had come to and would stay that way for his entire life, even though he put in more effort than anyone his age. The only good thing he was looking forward to was his corgi. His corgi, Milo, had been the best thing to happen to him in his entire life. Not that there were a lot of other life events that he could use as a comparison. His family had died in a car accident when he was just 13, resulting in him having to jump from one foster home to another until he was 18 and had enough money to get an apartment. It wasn't an apartment you would find in a magazine. It was a run-down block of old buildings with more walls with moss than he had ever seen in his life. He lived in the apartment for 7 years, not having the financial freedom to shift to another place that would be slightly better than the dumpster. One night, as the rain beat down on the dark streets with dimly lit streetlights that cast an eerie glow, distorting the road, his lonely life flipped. Like any other day, Alex drove through the city picking up customers, trying to portray himself as a happy-go-lucky guy and dropping those people off at destinations he wished were his final home. The entire day had been exhausting. His morning started with a rude customer who thought they had the right to treat Alex like he was below them. Unless he wanted to lose his job, Alex couldn't do much except listen and try to respond as calmly as he could. Alex couldn't wait to go home and sleep on his couch until he had to wake up and continue the tedious process again. However, the last ride of the day changed his plans, not just for the day, but for his life. He had been waiting to pick up the customer and drop them off at their location without indulging in a conversation. He had developed the habit of tapping his index and middle fingers on the steering wheel as a distraction. All that changed when a girl who looked roughly 19 hopped, sobbing, into the car, asking to be dropped off at a house on the other side of town. She kept looking back towards the place she was picked up from. It reminded him of a fearful animal that would glance behind to ensure the predator hadn't followed it. Ensuring he followed the rules of his work, Alex did not intrude despite being aware that something was wrong. It was hard, very hard, to stay silent. His eyes would move to his rearview mirror to see the girl state, "He hit me again, Lily. I can't do it anymore. I don't know how much longer I can handle all of this." The girl sobbed into her phone. Her hand trembled with fear. Every word she uttered after that had Alex hooked, and he couldn't help but eavesdrop once he had gotten a good look at how she shivered when she spoke. All he wanted to do was give her the warmest hug he could muster and tell her everything would be okay. As he contemplated the best possible course of action, he decided offering water to the girl wouldn't do any harm, so that's exactly what he did. He grabbed a new water bottle on his dashboard and handed it to the girl without saying anything. She mumbled, "Thank you," before quietly sobbing into her phone. Finally, calm enough to form coherent sentences, she started explaining what had happened over the night to the speaker on the other end. Alex couldn't help but listen to the conversation. The girl's name was Hazel, which Alex had picked up from his client's profile. While she spoke in broken sentences to who Alex assumed was a friend, he could briefly gauge what Hazel was going through. Yeah, he hit me this time. I know, you did warn me. But what am I supposed to do, Lily? He's my father. I can't just abandon him. Yeah, I know. Well, because I didn't finish my chores. I know it's crazy, but my dad was drunk. Yeah, I will call you once I'm out of this Uber. She seemed shaken up by the events that played out, and Alex saw Hazel take deep breaths, trying to calm herself, and was a little satisfied to know that it was working. Seeing the girl in this state reminded him so much of himself and his experience in foster homes. The dark memories from foster care, or Alex's burning desire to help Hazel, eventually pushed him to break the one rule Uber drivers had to follow. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" he said awkwardly. No, nothing," she stammered. And Alex didn't know if it was fear or the overwhelming amount of emotion she was going through. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." "I'm okay, just a little shaken up. Life at home isn't the greatest. And it got unbearable tonight. I had to leave," Hazel replied, sighing deeply, and for a moment, no one spoke. Alex wasn't sure if she would continue, and it seemed like Hazel was trying to calm her nerves by drinking the entire bottle of water Alex had given her. After a few moments, Alex decided to break the silence by asking her if she wanted to confide in him, while letting her know he understood what coming from a broken family felt like, and maybe having someone who's gone through similar experiences listen would help. Alex seemed to be weighing the pros and cons of this, her eyes darting from her hands to Alex, until she finally sighed and nodded. "My mom died a year ago in a car accident. She was on her way to pick me up from cheer practice when a truck rammed into her, and she passed away right there. I guess my dad decided to blame me for her death, considering she was coming to pick me up. Honestly, sometimes I think he's not wrong." Alex noticed that Hazel's breath rate started getting quicker. He motioned for her to drink water while telling her to take deep breaths. Hazel continued with her story once she had taken a few deep breaths to regulate her breathing. "Over the months, he started getting aggressive towards me and made me clean the house and do chores for him that was never up to his expectations. It seems as if he's turning the grief of my mom dying into anger and directing all of it towards me." With tears running down her face, she told Alex how her dad used to be a nice, gentle guy and never expected him to turn against her. Hazel's knuckles went white as she crushed the empty bottle in her hand when she moved on to how abusive her father had become in the last few months. They continued to converse about how she dealt with all of this until they reached her location. Before getting out of the car, she thanked Alex for listening to her, and at that moment, Alex made a decision that changed his and her life. He asked Hazel for an address where they could send each other letters so that he could make sure she was safe. Exchanging addresses, Hazel got out of the car with a smile, her chest feeling light. It seemed as if both of them developed a sibling-like relationship where Alex felt the need to protect Hazel as if she was his little sister. And Hazel felt comforted by Alex, just like she imagined she would feel if she had an older brother. Unfortunately, she was an only child and had no siblings to support her. They started exchanging letters weekly, with Hazel giving Alex the details about her school life, her cheer competitions, and her life at home. Alex made sure to reply to every single letter, cheering Hazel on and motivating her to keep going, even though the situation at her house worsened over time. It gave both of them a sense of peace to know they had another person they could rely on in times of need. It was almost like an intermission, just a few seconds of light in their lives. But like all good must come to an end, Their brief period of happiness was crushed when Hazel's father found out about the letters. "I'm so stupid," Hazel thought when she came home to realize that she hadn't picked up the letters in the mailbox before leaving for school. Now her dad sat on the sofa in front of the door with the letter she had received this morning opened on the table in front of him, along with all the other letters she had kept in her drawer. He sucked in air through gritted teeth, a sign he was furious. His cheeks were flushed red from the multiple drinks he had had. "What is all of this, Hazel? Who is this man you're talking to?" All she could do was fall to her knees, apologizing and crying for forgiveness. She knew her dad was more furious that she had told someone else about his actions, and now he would never let her send another letter again. When her dad returned to his room, Hazel picked herself up from the floor, went to her room, and started packing her bag. She sent what she believed to be her last letter to Alex. "Alex, this isn't an ordinary letter. My dad found out about the letters we have been exchanging, and now I will never be able to send another one again. This will be the last one. Please look after yourself and don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I'll figure out how to survive. I always do. Please don't reply to this, Alex. I'll get in trouble. Thank you for always being there for me. I'll never forget you. H." As she scribbled the last line, tears splotched the previous line, and all she could think of was if Alex would be able to read the letter. Days go by with no communication between the two. Hazel continued with her life the same as before she met Alex, even though there was a void in her life that she couldn't fill. However, Alex couldn't think straight since he got Hazel's letter telling him not to contact her again. He did not know if she was safe and didn't feel comfortable letting her stay there without any knowledge of her well-being. Alex was driving home when he abruptly made a sharp U-turn and went opposite. His mind filled with determination, he decided to stop by Hazel's house and see how she was doing for himself. He tried to remain patient and forget about her, but those few weeks were the best weeks of his life, and all he wanted was to get that back. Fortunately for Hazel and Alex, Hazel's dad wasn't home when she opened the door to Alex standing on her doorstep. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her eyes wide with shock. "I had to see if you were okay. I was worried," Alex replied, shaking and ruffling his hair. Hazel invited Alex inside since her dad was going to be out late and explained every detail of what had happened the day her dad found the letters. "It got bad. I don't think I can go through it again. That's why I decided to stop sending any letters. I'm sorry for making you worried." Alex felt a sense of anger wash over him as he realized what Hazel, someone he considered his younger sister, was going through while living here. "You must leave, Hazel. It's not safe for you to stay here." He convinced Hazel to leave the house, going to the spare house that she went to when they first met. It took a while to get the point across, but Alex understood how scary the situation might be for her and gave her time to decide while he prepared tea for her. "Okay." A voice echoed through the house and reached him. Hazel had agreed to escape this broken home. Alex helped her pack her bags while she wrote a note for her dad, explaining that she could no longer live here and needed to leave to keep herself sane. Settling in the passenger seat of his car, Alex managed to drop Hazel off at her new house. She got off with the promise that she would continue writing, letting him know she was okay. That night, as Hazel lay in bed without her father looming over her, threatening her with death, she felt at ease, knowing that someone loved her. Alex lay on his couch, and for the first time in so many years, he slept with the happiness that someone was out there who cared for him. Even if his life hadn't gotten better financially, there was someone who was emotionally there for him.
Henry left his daughter's apartment angrily. He was upset with her grades in college and her unorganized lifestyle. He had gone to her apartment at 10 a.m. and was surprised to see that she was deep asleep and had missed her college. Moreover, her apartment was a total mess, with a horrid stench of rotten food. Henry had given his daughter an earful and instructed her to become more organized and dedicated to her studies. But she didn't take anything seriously. In fact, She slammed her apartment door and went back to sleep. Sophia woke at 5 a.m. She prepared tea and breakfast for herself and then woke up her father. She had her classes at 10 a.m., but before that, she had to be at one of her clients' houses to clean. She quickly did her house chores, packed up a clean outfit in her college bag, and left the house at 7 a.m. to walk to Mrs. Adelman's house. At 7:20, Sophia reached her house. She wore her rubber gloves and an apron and tied her hair into a tight bun before getting to work. Mrs. Adelman was a middle-aged woman who liked holding parties at her house. She always called Sophia to make her house squeaky clean before sending the invites to her family and friends. Mrs. Adelman loved Sophia's work. She was quick, honest, and never overcharged from her. Sophia vacuumed and mopped the floor, dusted the walls and furniture, and washed the windows. Mrs. Adelman gave her the money and forced her to stay for a coffee. Sophia couldn't turn her down and agreed. Once she had finished, she realized that it was 9:40 and she had to rush to college. She grabbed her bag and ran outside, forgetting to change her clothes. She was panting hard when she reached her class. When she entered the class, she realized that she had not changed her clothes, but it was too late. "Why are you late, miss? Did you just wake up and come here?" Henry yelled at her. Sophia was embarrassed and looked at the new professor. "I am sorry, sir. It won't happen next time," she replied courteously. "That doesn't answer my question. Why are you late?" Henry asked again. The entire class was looking at Sophia, and she felt weak in her knees. "Professor, I was at work. I tried my best to reach on time, but I couldn't," she explained. "You were at work in the morning? Are you trying to bluff me? Most of the students work in the evenings or at weekends. What kind of amazing job do you do?" Henry demanded an answer from her. Sophia licked her lips and replied, "I work as a maid. I work for a few hours every day." The class was looking at her. Henry scowled at her and said, "Young lady, don't be so greedy about money. Try to focus on your studies. You have a lifetime to earn. You are lucky to be enrolled in this college, so better use it before you get expelled because you prioritize cleaning people's dirt over your studies." Sophia could hear a few students giggling at her, but she ignored them. Nobody knew how badly she needed the money to stay in college and complete her degree. She was disappointed that her professor thought that she was greedy for money. At 5 p.m., when Sophia was leaving, she met Professor Henry. He looked at her dirty t-shirt and rolled his eyes. "Today's kids will never learn how to dress up properly for college. They take everything for granted." He passed the comment and went towards his car. Sophia was hurt and knew it would be tough to keep Professor Henry happy. They had started on a bad note. She sighed and rushed home as she had to go to 2 more houses to clean. At 9 p.m., Sophia returned home with every part of her body aching. She showered, prepared dinner, and then finished her college homework. She went to her bed at 1 a.m., thinking about how much more money she needed to meet the monthly expenditure and save for her father's treatment. Lost in her own thoughts, Sophia slept deeply to start another day. The next morning, she received a call from a girl named Maria. She wanted to hire Sophia to clean her apartment and cook weekly food for her. Maria called Sophia for the interview at 7 p.m. Sophia started her day by preparing breakfast, packing her bag, and doing a quick calculation of how much Maria will pay her and how much more she needs to pay the rent. She had reached college earlier today and decided to go to the library to prepare for the quiz. Henry had seen Sophia reading the book in the library and thought that if his daughter had taken his scolding seriously, she would have improved her grades. Sophia went to her class and was nervous about Professor Henry's class. She knew she had not made a good impression on the professor, so he disliked her. To set things right, Sophia had studied hard for the quiz to prove to the professor that she was serious about her studies. As soon as the professor entered the class, he looked at Sophia and said, "Well, Sophia, I'm glad you took my words seriously and didn't waste your time to earn extra bucks, and that too by doing a dirty job." A few students looked at Sophia and made noises. A few of them said, "Oh, poor Sophia didn't get any decent job in the city." All these remarks hurt Sophia badly, but she didn't show she was affected. "I'll show them during the quiz," she thought. Sophia was unstoppable during class discussions and rapid-fire quizzes. She got all her answers right, and Henry and her classmates impressed her. "After all, you do care about your studies. I am glad. Make sure you continue the same performance to find a better job than cleaning someone's house in their dirty laundry," Henry replied with a smirk. Sophia grabbed her bag and left the classroom with tears flowing down her cheek. She hated Professor Henry for embarrassing her for working as a maid. "He has no idea why I clean people's dirty houses," she thought. She went home and changed for her interview with Maria at 7 p.m. She arrived 10 minutes earlier at the cafe. She waited for 15 minutes for Maria to join her. Maria was 2 years older than Sophia and studied in the arts college. She told Sophia that she needed help to clean her house and prepare meals at home. "I have gained a lot of weight by eating takeaways and online deliveries, not to mention the harm it has done to my skin and stomach." Maria pointed at her acne marks as she explained the job to Sophia. She also asked about Sophia's charges and instantly agreed. "Great then. How about you come to my place 3 days a week after 6 p.m.?" Maria suggested, to which Sophia agreed. "Sure, ma'am. I'll be there. Please call me Maria." Maria smiled and left the cafe. Sophia was happy that she had found another client. The next day after college, she went to Maria's place and was shocked to see how dirty her apartment was. "I know, it's a lot of work. I am very messy, and now things have gotten out of control," Maria said to Sophia. "No problem, Maria. I'll take care of it," Sophia assured her. For the next few hours, Maria observed Sophia clean her apartment. She picked up her dirty laundry, threw away the trash, made her bed, vacuumed the floors, and cleaned the fridge. Maria was impressed with how quick and efficient Sophia was. She complimented Sophia. "Wow, you are amazing! My apartment looks so neat, all thanks to you." Sophia smiled and went to the kitchen to prepare fresh food for Maria. "Is it okay if I make sandwiches for you? Or would you like a wrap?" Sophia asked Maria. "I'd love to eat a chicken wrap," Maria answered. Sophia warmed up the pita bread and made an amazing chicken and veggies filling with whatever ingredients she could find in Maria's fridge and kitchen. She made 3 wraps and stored the remaining filling in a Tupperware. "Here you go, Maria. I have kept some extra filling in the fridge so you can prepare sandwiches or wraps when you are running short on time." Sophia kept the plate on the table and cleaned the kitchen. "That's delicious, Sophia. Why don't you join me?" Maria said. Sophia shook her head and said politely, "I must go home. My father would be waiting for his dinner." "You will cook after all this tiring work? Won't your mother fix up the dinner?" Maria asked. Sophia smiled and said, "My mother died 5 years ago of leukemia. It's just my father and me." "I am so sorry, Sophia. It must be hard for you, right? To manage college, house chores, and then doing your job?" Maria asked her. "Yes, it gets tough, but I need the money and college degree to make things better for my father. He has been diagnosed with a liver problem, and we don't have enough money to go for a transplant. I have to work as a maid to save up money for my father and run the house," Sophia explained. "Wow, I am so impressed, Sophia, that you can do so much at such a young age. Can I ask you one more thing?" Maria asked her. Sophia nodded, and Maria asked her, "How do you manage your studies amidst all this? Does it affect your grades?" Sophia smiled and said, "I am a straight-A student. I wake up early daily to review my lectures and prepare for college." Maria smiled and enjoyed her wrap while Sophia left her home. Looking at Sophia had inspired Maria. She is working so hard to make her life better, and here I am wasting my days sleeping and not taking my studies seriously, she wondered before going to sleep. "I'll try to wake up early tomorrow," Maria promised herself and went to sleep. Sophia was happy to work for Maria. She was easy to talk to and didn't bug her when she was working. As always, Sophia woke up early and prepared for college. She looked at her class schedule and frowned. "I have Professor Henry's class today. He'll make sure to embarrass me again," she said. Reluctantly, she went to the college and saw Professor Henry in the morning. "Good morning, Professor Henry," she greeted and went to the classroom. When the professor entered the class, he announced the test schedule, and the class groaned. "I want you all to prepare seriously for your exams and forget about everything else," he announced loudly. A few seconds later, he added, "Especially you, Sophia. I hope you sit at home rather than scrubbing other people's bathroom floor." The class roared in laughter. Sophia had enough with Professor. She was doing everything to fix things right with the professor, but he intentionally picked on her because she worked as a maid to save money for his father's ailment. She cried and left the classroom. "Sophia, I have a special guest coming today. I want you to make everything perfect and fix a nice dinner." Maria was nervous. Sophia smiled and asked her to relax. For the next few hours, Sophia managed everything, including the dinner. She made chicken steaks with mashed potatoes and fresh orange juice. Maria thanked her, and the doorbell rang. She quickly rushed to open the door. "Hello, Dad. Please come inside." Maria hugged her dad. Sophia was surprised to see Professor Henry was Maria's dad. Henry kissed Maria's forehead and was surprised to see Sophia at her daughter's apartment. "Dad, she's my friend, Sophia." Maria introduced Sophia to Henry, unaware they already knew each other. "Sophia, are you hanging out with your friend on a college night? That too when you have exams next week," Henry said sternly. Sophia nodded and said, "I'm just leaving, Professor Henry." "Wait, Sophia. Please stay for dinner, Maria said to Sophia. No, I must go. My father will be waiting for me. Sophia smiled and went out. Your room looks really good, Maria. I am glad you have started to make positive changes in your lifestyle. Henry praised Maria. Yes, and a big thank you to Sophia for helping me. She is amazing, Dad, Maria replied to him. Henry was surprised to learn that Sophia worked as a maid for Maria. She is such a hardworking girl, Dad. She wakes up at dawn, prepares breakfast, gets ready for school, and then does her job after college to save up for her father's treatment, Maria said to Henry. What's wrong with her father? Henry was curious to learn more about his student, whom he always embarrassed. He is going through some liver problem. Sophia said she is saving up for his transplant. Isn't she great, Dad? Maria kept praising Sophia, and Henry listened quietly. The next day at college, Henry called Sophia into his office. Professor Henry, did you call for me? Sophia asked cautiously. Henry nodded and signaled to her. Sophia, I want to apologize for my behavior. I didn't know you were responsible for managing your house and saving for your father's medical treatment. I am in awe of your hard work and how you perfectly manage everything. I hope you can forgive me, Henry said remorsefully. Sophia couldn't believe her ears that Henry was sorry for his behavior. It's okay, Professor. I was hurt, but I am glad everything is fine between us, she replied politely. She started to get up when Henry called her again. Also, thank you for inspiring my daughter. She has become much more organized and serious about her college. Henry smiled at her. Sophia was glad that Professor Henry had finally learned about her situation and won't taunt her again for working as a maid.
Daniela Williamson is a pretty young woman born in Westminster, United Kingdom. She was the kind to be the life of the party. With her blonde hair and blue eyes, she was hard to miss. A prophecy to her person, witty and gracious shines that would stroke any man. Daniela's life began to take a different turn when she fell in love with a young man named Robinson Stewart, the son of a wealthy entrepreneur in Britain. Daniela, a young woman who hadn't achieved anything at the time, found it hard to impress Mrs. Robinson, who only saw her as a gold digger and somebody who wasn't worthy of her son. Despite young Stewart's efforts to make his family accept for Daniela, all fell numb. She couldn't get the treatment she deserved or felt she earned from the young man's family and ultimately became heartbroken because she lost out on her first ever true love. It was a cold day for Daniela when she discovered that her lovely boyfriend had been flown out of the country by his parents to cut communications with her and end their prematured relationship effectively. She would return home in tears to be consoled by a few friends who had nothing but soft words for her. This was a tough time for Daniela, whose heart was very bright, exposed quite early to the world's harsh realities. She couldn't find fun in anything she indulged. It was all blurry. So she sewed herself together and decided that she would leave for another country and start a new life. This time, she would make her own rules. Daniela arrived in the U.S., and the social life in the U.S. welcomed her like anybody with a bruised ego or a wounded soul. She was very determined to use her hurt to build a wall around herself that would not allow anybody to hurt her again or make her experience anything like what she went through a few months ago. Daniela then enrolled in a U.S. business school and earned her degree with excellent grades. At this point, she has decided that she will not give her affection to anyone or open up to anyone emotionally. This was the position of a new wave of feminine movement in the U.S. at the time called feminism. Although feminism has long existed, it continued to evolve with new waves along with fractioning reviews. Daniela adopted it to the extreme and ensured she didn't give any chance at extending love or receiving either. She was well known for this at her workplace and where she lived. Many guys would hit on her, but she wouldn't even seem to see them. All she was focused on was the money, fame, and reputation for being one of the best in business practices across the country. And boy, did she achieve, overwhelmingly. She would sweep the awards clean at the end of every year, causing her to become more and more appealing, adding to her gorgeous looks. Suitors were flooding her phones with messages and trying different passages to reach her, but none was given a slice of a chance. As the years rolled, she became a symbol of what she represents, a staunch feminist with extreme reservations. She was even a role model to some younger women whose dreams were to fashion themselves the same way as Daniela. Her influence on the media space was over the roof, and she got all the attention she needed for all the wrong reasons. When the news of the famous Daniela Williamson would reach far and wide, attracting the attention of nearly everybody who was a voice in society, people of influence, and reputable leaders in organizations that were affiliated with hers, Mr. Hutchinson, who ran a media house, decided to invite her over for an interview that will be publicized. In that interview, Daniela expressed her position for not wanting any man or wanting to get married, have any kids, or even have pets. She positioned herself like somebody who would never have any need for affection or emotional exchange. Now, even her neighbors have seen and heard for themselves. It was no longer a rumor. That interview was the point of no return. She had stamped herself permanently with a stigma. So the age rolled in and rolled by as nature would also step, slowing on the gas. Daniela gathered all the things she thought were life's most lovely things at the time. The jewelry, the penthouse, the perfect rims, and everything speaks to a successful career woman. And after all of it, and a little while, it all began to wash off. The illusion of what matters began to drain away as she retired from work. Her knees are not as strong as they once were. She would need a little help getting around her penthouse. She would stand on her balcony and see her neighbors sitting out on their porches in the evening, chatting themselves to laughter. These were also successful people in their rights. She noticed they had a better routine day than she's ever had since her stay-at-home period began. They'd go shopping and groceries, drive in together, and pull out the bags from the car trunk, holding hands and talking about their day. Daniela hadn't spoken to anyone in that way for a long time. She began to feel a sense of loss, of regret, of things she would have had, the most important things. At this point, she starts to cry inside. She now takes time to reflect on why her life has taken this path and ended up with no one of value. Though old and almost stale, she remembers her episodes with her first and only attempts at love, Robinson Stewart. She searched for him on social media, but the closest she got was an old account that didn't seem active for long. She becomes desperate to have people close to her, males especially. She reaches out to job agents and employs a driver and a butler. She wants to get a feel of emotion, however spiritual. These employees soon discover that their roles are more a farce than an actual job, especially the butler, who she continually pushes in ways that are uncomfortable to him. It didn't take them so long to figure out why they were employed, and the butler resigned. It became more brutal as the day added to itself. She couldn't find the peace she craved, the comfort and enjoyable lives the Lots were having. Her next-door neighbor's daughter comes visiting from college. There are a lot of vibes and outdoor games in the neighborhood, adding to Daniela's plight. She tries to get a pet, but that comes with every shade of disappointment because she can't learn to live with it. The dog fell sick after a couple of weeks and was retrieved by the animal welfare. She didn't even know how to walk the dog, and no one cared to come close to her or advise her. It was that bad. She hates herself and the kind of life she now lives. More and more desperation led to her wanting to try online dating and put up a profile. But nobody wants to date a woman of her age, and that's for those who don't know the famous Daniela Williamson. Those her age roaming online already have their families and wouldn't be looking for commitment. Neither would they have that deep desired affection to extend her. This made her very lonely and empty. One day, she asked her driver to take her to the park. It was one of the few places she often asked him to take her, and that was because of the atmosphere there most evenings. She would take to a corner to admire young couples sitting together, talking, and seeing a few people like herself alone. This gives her a bit of hope, but doesn't take away the burden altogether. So this day, she takes the courage to talk to an older man who also sat alone. The older man was very accommodating and responding to her greeting with so much warmth. It was the first time in a long time that she'd felt such openness from a stranger. "Come sit with me," the man said as he adjusted himself on the bench to make her comfortable. Their conversation was telepathic. He told her about himself and how he lost his family in a house fire accident while at work. It was a sad story. He and his family used to come to the park to spend time, which is why he still comes there in memory of them. This was so touching that Daniela rubbed on his shoulders to empathize with and console him. She told him about herself, her story, and how she did not have anybody to live with at this stage. Her story was also sad and full of regret. The man told her that the world always has its way of consoling every soul that's worn and needs the healing of humanity. After sitting together for almost an hour, the day began to darken, and fewer people were at the park. It was an exact time to go. Daniela asked him where he stayed, since his house was gotten by fire, and he told her that he sleeps wherever he finds himself when the sun goes down. Daniela was almost moved to tears, and offered him to come with her. The driver drove them home, and as they came down from the vehicle, the neighbors who saw them were slightly surprised at what they saw. Daniela made her home very hospitable for him, warm bath and fresh clothes on his back. It was such a good feeling to find someone she could feel a bond with, no matter how small. The weeks that followed were the best for Daniela. They went clothes shopping and other things they needed. They went to the movies, plays, park walks, and anything they wanted to do together. The void felt as though it was never. They both complemented each other's needs. Soon enough, Daniela and her new partner decided to get a pet that would stay with them and join them on their daily walks. It was uplifting for Daniela and her newfound love, which ticked every box for her. After months of living together, she thought it wasn't just enough to find and live her best life, but to try and rewrite a little bit of her legacy, and, by extension, correct the impressions she left on those that viewed her as a role model. She arranged another expressive interview with Mr. Hutchinson. This time, she attended with her lover. It was all surprising for those who had previously known her, but also served to remind many that life still can give us what we want if we long for it and push ourselves in the correct part. Now, she feels wholly fulfilled and lends herself to charity, helping career women identify what's most important in life and supporting them to achieve their dreams without giving up true happiness.